Welcome to Happy, Healthy, Whole, and Rich, where faith meets action and transformation is non-negotiable. I'm Tina Brinkley Potts, and I believe now is the time to step boldly into your power, walk in divine wisdom, and claim the life you were meant to live. Each episode, I'll bring you real, unfiltered truth, because this world needs leaders who refuse to shrink. Let's get it. Welcome back to Happy, Healthy, Whole, and Rich. I'm Tina Brinkley Potts, and I want to remind you, I know who I play for, and so do you. Last time, we talked about how nothing in your story has been wasted. How every job, every season, every industry you've ever stood in was preparation, not detour. We talked about full integration mode. No longer living in silos, no longer apologizing for the chapters that don't match a polished resume. But I know some of you finished that episode and asked the question underneath the question. Okay, Tina, I believe nothing was wasted. I believe I was built for a time such as this. But now what? What do I actually do with it? That's what today is about. Because believing your story matters is one thing. Knowing how to turn it into something the world can receive, something that serves people and sustains you, that's a different skill. That's integration in motion. That's what I want to talk to you about today. I want to take you back to that season as controller at that concrete manufacturing firm. Because there's a piece of that story I didn't tell you the last time. I remember sitting in meetings with numbers that told a story nobody else in the room could read yet. That's what a controller does. You don't just record what happened, you interpret it. You look at raw data and you find the story inside it. And then you use that story to make a decision about what happens next. Increase the order. Adjust the margin, flag the risk before it becomes a crisis. I didn't know it then, but I was being trained into something I now teach women every single day. I just didn't have a name for it yet. Here's what I mean. Every one of us walks around with data, not spreadsheet data, life data. What happened to you, what you survived, what you built, what you lost, what you learned the hard way. That's just data. It's neutral. It's information. But most of us stop there. We collect the data of our lives and we let it just sit as a private memory, a thing we mention in passing, a wound we don't talk about, a skill we assume everyone has. We don't do anything with it. And that's where the value gets left on the table. Because data by itself doesn't change anyone's life. Data has to become story before it means something. And story has to become projection before it becomes useful to anybody else. This is what I call the DSP method. Data, story, projection. And I want to walk you through it fully today, because this is the mechanism. This is how what you live becomes what you offer. Data is simply what happened, no interpretation yet. I was a controller at a manufacturing firm for 9 years. That's data, neutral, factual. Story is the meaning we make of the data. And here's where most of us get stuck, because usually only find one story, and it's often the smallest, most limiting one available. The story I could have told about that season was, I worked in an industry that has nothing to do with what I do now. That story closes the door. But there's a truer, bigger story available in the same data. I learned to find the narrative inside numbers other people couldn't see. I learned financial stewardship. I learned how a whole organization holds together or falls apart based on decisions made in rooms most employees never enter. Same data, completely different story. And only one of those stories serves the life I'm building now. And for goodness sake, I helped take that company public. Think about what that does in my idea of building a $1 billion portfolio. My goodness. Projection is where it becomes something usable for you and for someone else. If I stayed in the small story, I stay a former controller with an unrelated past. But when I move into something bigger, the projection changes entirely. I become someone who can teach other women how to read the data in their own lives, their pain, their pivots, their unrelated looking jobs, and find the story that actually serves them instead of the one that keeps them small. How I help struggling owners who have thriving companies, but they can't take 2 weeks off of vacation because they don't understand how to build a system that still works without them. That's knowledge monetization, not in a cold transactional sense. I don't want you to hear dollar signs when I say these phrases. I want you to hear stewardship, because what you survived, what you learned, what you built with your own 2 hands in rooms nobody was watching, that's not just your testimony. That's your inventory. And you were never meant to let it sit unused. This is where a lot of spiritual women get stuck. And I want to name it directly because I felt it myself. We've been taught that talking about the value of our knowledge, our story, and our experience, that feels like bragging. Like commerce doesn't belong next to calling. Like if it's really God, it should be free. But I want you to sit with something. A talent that's buried doesn't bless nobody. Stewardship isn't the opposite of faith. It's the evidence of it. Which brings me to the parable Jesus told about the talents in Matthew chapter 25. A man going on a journey entrusts his property to 3 servants. To one he gives 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, each according to his own ability. The first 2 servants go out and put what they were given to work, and they double it. But the 3rd servant, the one given 1 talent, he goes and digs a hole in the ground and he buries it. When the master returns, he commends the first 2. Well done, good and faithful servant. But to the 3rd, the one who buried what he was given out of fear, the master says something sobering. He calls them wicked and slothful and takes even the 1 talent away. I used to read that parable and think it was only about money. It's not. A talent in that context was a measure of something valuable entrusted to someone for a purpose. It was never meant to stay buried. It was given so it could be put to work, so it could increase, so it could serve, so it could multiply into something greater than it started as. Here's what stops me every time I read it. The servant who buried his talent wasn't lazy in a way we usually picture laziness. Scripture tells us why he did it. He said, I was afraid. Fear is what buried the talent, not disobedience, not carelessness, fear. I think about how many women are sitting on the exact same fear today. Not fear of losing money, fear of being seen, fear of being called prideful for naming what they know. Fear that if they turn their pain into teaching, somebody will say they're profiting off their trauma. Fear that their knowledge isn't sophisticated enough, credentialed enough, polished enough to be worthy of anything to anyone. So they dig a hole and they bury the very thing that was entrusted to them for a time such as this. But the master didn't give those talents so they'd stay safe. He gave them so they'd be stewarded. And stewardship always requires risk. It always requires being seen. It always requires trusting that what you were given was given on purpose. And it was never meant to just sit there protecting your comfort. Your data, your story, was entrusted to you the same way. Not to bury, to multiply. Ernest Holmes taught that we live in a universe of law, and that the law of circulation is one of the most consistent principles in all of creation. Nothing in a healthy system is meant to be stagnant. Water that doesn't move becomes stale. Money that doesn't move becomes hoarding. And knowledge that doesn't move becomes wasted potential instead of living wisdom. Circulation is not just financial, it's spiritual law. Florence Scovel Shinn wrote often about the idea that we must give in order to receive, that withholding what we have out of fear or false humility actually blocks the very flow we're praying for. She'd say the buried talent isn't just disobedience, it's a blockage in the channel. James Allen, in As a Man Thinketh, said that circumstance doesn't make the person, it reveals them. I think about that concrete manufacturing job and every job like it that so many of us want to leave off the resume. Those circumstances didn't just happen to us. They revealed capacities in us we hadn't discovered yet. And once revealed, a capacity doesn't belong to the circumstance that uncovered it. It belongs to you. You carry it forward. And Dr. David Hawkins, in his map of consciousness, placed fear far below courage on the emotional scale and placed something even higher above both of them, love, and above that, the states where creation and true power live. Moving your knowledge from buried to shared isn't just a business decision. It's a movement up the scale. It's leaving the frequency of fear and stepping into the frequency of stewardship, of courage, of love expressed as usefulness to another person. This is what full integration produces. Last episode, I told you integration means you stop living in silos. Today, I want you to understand what integration is for. It's not just personal wholeness for its own sake, although that matters deeply. It's so that your wholeness can circulate, so the data of your life, once you've found the true story inside it, can become a projection that blesses someone else the way you once needed to be blessed. Buried talents don't build kingdoms. Multiplied ones do. Now I want you to sit with these questions. Let your life answer them honestly. Number one, what data from your life have you never turned into a story, a season, a job, a survival you simply never examined for what it actually taught you? Number two, what's the small limiting story you've been telling about the data? What would the bigger, truer story sound like instead? Number three, if you move that story into projection, into something someone else could receive and use, what would it look like? Who is the woman who needs exactly what you lived through? Number four, where has fear been the reason you buried a talent rather than disobedience or laziness? Be honest. What are you actually afraid will happen if you stop burying it? Number five, what would it look like to steward your knowledge the way the first two servants stewarded their talents? Putting in the work, trusting it to increase, instead of protecting it by keeping it hidden. Here's what I know for certain. You were never given your story so you could keep it safe. You were given it so it could circulate. The happy, healthy, whole, and rich woman doesn't just believe her pain had a purpose. She does something with that belief. She takes the data of her life. She finds the truest and biggest story in it. And she has the courage to let that story become a projection that serves someone who's still buried in fear, still standing where she used to stand. She's not waiting for permission to call her knowledge valuable. She's not waiting for a credential to validate what she already lived and already knows. She understands that the parable was never really about the talents of silver. It was about her. It was about you. Because here's what the word tells us. Your gifts make room for you. Not your degree, not your title, not somebody else's approval of your journey. Your gift. And I need you to hear this part because I don't think we talk about it enough. Every moment that led up to the day was a gift. Every single one. The promotion, that was a gift. The season you can't fully explain to people because they weren't there, that was a gift. The concrete floor and the fluorescent lights and the meetings where you were the only woman in the room, that was a gift. The bedside and home health where you held someone's hand while they were afraid, that was a gift too. And some of those gifts didn't come wrapped in ribbon. Some of them came wrapped in sandpaper, rough, uncomfortable, the kind you wanted to hand back the moment you unwrapped it. The layoff, the betrayal, the year you barely made it through. The version of you that had to grow up faster than she should have. But sandpaper still makes things smooth. Sandpaper still refines. And a gift wrapped in sandpaper is still a gift. So I'm asking you today, are you ready to let it make room for you? Are you ready to stop apologizing for how you were shaped and start letting every rough edge and every hard season clear the path for what's already been assigned to you? Because your gift is not waiting on you to feel ready. Your gift is already making room. Rooms you haven't walked into yet are being prepared right now because of what you carry. Doors are opening on the other side of your obedience that you cannot see from where you're standing. So dig it up. Whatever you buried, out of fear, out of shame, out of thinking it wasn't sophisticated enough, out of believing the sandpaper seasons disqualified you instead of preparing you, dig it up and let it multiply. Let it circulate. Let it make room for you. I know who I play for. And I pray that after today, you remember who you play for too. Stay happy, stay healthy, stay whole, and stay rich in understanding that this is all you. So it's time to do right by you. If this episode names something that you've been burying, would you do me a favor? Send it to someone who is still afraid to call their knowledge valuable. Someone still waiting on a gift they haven't unwrapped yet. And let's grow together. Head over to happyhealthywholerich.com for more powerful teachings and join the movement. Remember, your breakthrough is waiting, but you have to show up. Until the next time, stay happy, healthy, whole, and rich.